Hello, and welcome back to the Richard Taliaferro podcast, where we take a look at career insights and give advice to career changers. Shelley Poovey is the founder and lead faculty member at Attune Coach Academy and the author of The Energy Intelligent Business, The Science and Soul of Sustainable Success, an ICF credentialed peak performance coach and continuing coach education provider. Shelley helps coaches, professionals, and leaders reconnect with clarity, presence, and sustainable performance, especially when the path forward isn't obvious. Her work sits at the intersection of neuroscience, intuition, business energetics, and leadership performance. At the center of it is a question many high achieving professionals eventually face. How do we perform well, make meaningful decisions, and lead effectively without disconnecting from ourselves in the process? Shelley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate being on the podcast. This is great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And so I want to get started because I saw an advanced copy of her book and it was very interesting. And I don't want to don't want to give the book away. By the time podcast comes out, your book will be out. And so I want you had an interesting journey in the beginning. You didn't start out as an entrepreneur or a coach, did you?
No, not at all.
Yeah. What was the sort of driving force in your life early on?
That's a great question. I mean, I talk in the book about these little breadcrumbs of our kind of inner knowing or inner guidance system that I call following your yes. That I think at the time it was happening, even when I was a teenager, I called it following my yes.
Yeah.
That was very kind of scary. It felt very much like I'm taking this blind leap. I'm getting some kind of pull to take a risk. I don't really know what's going to happen, but I'm about to find out something exciting. So that's kind of just been a part of my journey, even, as a teenager, maybe younger, but definitely it started showing up as a teenager. And really on a journey of discovering possibility. Coming from, as I think we all can relate, that especially in our teen years and our high school years, as we're preparing for life, capital L life, there's what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to do? What are you going to major in college? What's your career going to be? There's this pressure to decide that really early on when we don't have any life experience or really know who we are.
Right. Exactly.
And I think there's just something a little bit rebellious in my nature that sort of just felt it was kind of a reflex to rebel from that or question it. Even though I was doing very well in school, very academically driven, encouraged by my mentors, I was a high achiever and, quote unquote, destined for success, whatever that means. In retrospect, what does that even mean? But that was sort of the path. And to be set on a trajectory really early on that I don't talk about in the book, but I actually, when I went to college, I was going on a teaching scholarship, an education scholarship. And it came with it a kind of a path. This is, you're getting this money to go to school for education and become an educator, and you're on that track, right? And when I got into the process, I sort of realized I have thought that this is what I wanted from the time I can remember. And now that I'm out and living in the world, there's so much more out here than I could have imagined when I was 7 or 8 years old, right? Like, I think we can all relate to that, right? Like
Yeah, definitely.
And so I started to question that in college and took a year off to explore my creativity, explore expansion, take some risks that I think really paid off in terms of self-confidence and, trusting that yes. that then turned into later when I went back to college, after I took a gap year, I came back and got more into research psychology. I changed my major from education to uh, a scientific focus on psychology. So research psychology, and did research in auditory perception, visual perception, as an undergrad,
Mhm.
working in these research labs, as a primary assistant to these principal investigators at the
Sure.
school. And I had this vague notion of like, I'm interested in sensation and perception. Like I'm interested in how we think and how we perceive and how we sense and feel and how we make sense of the world. There was just some vague notion of that I was kind of just curious about from really kind of from a philosophical point of view. And then I just followed that. So it landed me in those research labs. It landed me into some interesting spaces, even and from an academic point of view of understanding the concept of consciousness.
Mhm.
What is consciousness? How do we make meaning in the world? How is meaning made for us in the world in ways that we're subconsciously taking in, and that's creating our sense of worldview that maybe we're not even questioning. So that was like a kind of an academic tract. And then I ended up and again, I talk about this in the book a little bit.
Mhm.
So it seems like a little leap,
Yeah.
but I ended up from there because when you're doing research psychology, you're working a lot with computers and
Sure. Yeah.
learning programming, and I took a lot of programming, courses and took some jobs as a programmer because, when you had skills like that, you know, the jobs were plentiful at the
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
because, Silicon Valley was in the boom stage and there was a lot of opportunity. So I just
Right.
took advantage of that. And
Yeah.
so from there, I ended up working in systems administration, computer science. I ended up working in like you know, just corporate jobs, quite a few corporate
Mhm.
jobs for a few years. I relocated to New York and took some corporate work.
Mhm.
Um, and so there wasn't ever a sense of I'm going to be an entrepreneur, that this is an entrepreneurial type of thing. I thought of myself more like, I'm on a path toward exploring this more philosophical question as an artist, and then
Mhm.
I have this day job,
Yeah. Right.
or have these series of day
Yeah.
jobs that, are really providing a lot of opportunity for me and a lot of freedom and flexibility. And then through a sequence of events, I just decided to follow the next yes, which was the kind of a bigger. I love your background, by the way, because I'm like, those are the kind of leaps that it
Yeah.
feels like when you're
Yeah.
on the edge. It feels like you're
Exactly.
standing
Right.
at the
Right.
edge of the Grand Canyon
Mhm.
here, like, okay, I see the other side, but how in the world am I going
How are
to
you
get
going to get
there?
there?
But I know that's where I need to go. I know that's what it is.
Right.
There's that
Right.
feeling.
Yeah. And before you continue on, I want to just touch on your wonderful phrase, following your yes. Do you find that the people you work with ignore that or have ignored that in their past?
Hmm.
And what do you find, how do you help them get to that yes?
I think it was 100%. I think that is one of my specialties, is
Mhm.
helping people. I think I think it's a systemic conditioning that we go through to ignore the yes. We're
Mm.
conditioned to ignore our yes. Be
Yeah.
practical. Um, and I think there's this wonderful middle ground where it's like, yeah, there's always the practical considerations, but the yes is a part of that. The yes is, it's there's a seed that's planted. And when that, when we really open up and listen in to the inner voice and inner guidance, then, all of that practical action becomes more like a garden, right? Things can really bloom
Mm.
that
Mm.
feel authentic to us, that
Mhm.
feel like, okay, yes, I'm doing these things, but I'm inside of the things that I'm doing. I'm inside of my career, or,
Mhm.
I'm inside of my choices. So I feel like that's a real key point to the work that I do, is helping people find their yes. Everybody has their yes. So helping people feel safety in exploring what that is, gaining trust in that, developing the skills. So a lot of what I do is like developmental coaching. So we spend a lot of time exploring exercises and strategies that develop that confidence,
Mm-hmm.
or I like to say unwind the conditioning
Mm-hmm.
that has kind of, dimmed or, softened our capacity to really tap into that, and to find a way to live from the yes in the choices, in your day-to-day choices for your life or decision making in your career, whether that's in your role or deciding what kind of work you want to do. Or, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs or small business owners. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of uncertainty in decision making, um, in life and in our careers. So learning how to use find the yes, clarify it, learn how to feel it, I think is a key component, is that it's something that is moving from an intellectual or kind of mental, um, which can sometimes be a little abstract or easy to question,
Mm-hmm.
but learning how to feel the yes somatically.
It, and so I want to get back to your story because it takes an interesting turn where, and can you talk about that turn and talk about embodying it? And you literally did that for a while when you were living in Manhattan. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm one of the reasons that I'm attract people who want to work on this is because I've lived it. So I think that a lot of the feedback that I get from my clients is, when they learn a little bit about my story, is say, "Oh, well, it makes sense that you have empathy, for what I'm going through because you've lived it, right? I'm not up on a pedestal saying, that doesn't happen to me, and that there's
Right.
something wrong with you that you
Mm-hmm.
don't have connection." It's like, yeah, this is a real thing, and the struggle is real, to kind of align with it. And I think for me, there was, yes, this sense of an inner yes, but also the struggle to trust it,
Mm-hmm.
um, on a consistent basis. So I was good with the leap, but then there would always be kind of the boomerang effect, or, questioning, like, I like to say the map is not the territory. Like,
Yeah.
you decide where you want to go, but then once you get inside of it, it's not what you imagined, and you have to navigate a lot of dynamics that you didn't bargain for. And there's some adversity that comes from that, of kind of like, pioneering a different path.
Right.
And so for me, there was an experience of kind of a cyclical, like I call it, like a skip, like a scratch on a record, that the needle kind of skips that part every time it
Mm-hmm.
gets to it. So I think for me, there was this expansion, and then I would get to the little, metaphorical scratch on the record, and then things would kind of like, it's like seem like it would come together, and then like not quite come together. And it was kind of like this pattern. And I ended up kind of years and years of doing meditation and mindfulness work, and working with consciousness and intuition development, started to use those skills. And by the way, I worked with a lot of amazing coaches and amazing healers and amazing practitioners, and they were super, super helpful, but nothing quite got down into that underneath. It was almost like there was a piece of this that I kind of had to do on my own.
Okay.
I kind of had to figure
Mm-hmm.
out for myself. That was something that other people couldn't see. And it was like a blind spot for me. Like, what's this hiccup, that I
Mm-hmm.
keep experiencing? And started using my tools to really dive in, and, kind of what I call mine, kind of mine the subconscious mind, and pull out the stuff that was kind of stuck in there that was part of the story.
Now, I'm curious about how, in people approaching you to work with you, and they hear you talk about meditation and the like, and maybe they're skeptical about
Mhm.
what you're talking about. How do you come to terms with their skepticism? and as we talked about a little bit earlier, they're conditioning about these, I don't want to call them soft skills, but I mean, that's the only phrase I've got at
Mm.
hand right now to call it
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, I had a mentor in my undergrad who was an expert, a psychologist who was an expert in human behavioral decision making that I asked to read the book and give me feedback on. And he gave great feedback. And one of it was the skepticism about these concepts, being even real.
Wow.
Right? Is this even real?
Yeah.
Because you think about it from a scientific point of view, are these things real? And it's like, well, you know, it's a great question to have because I think we have these questions. I have these questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Coming from a scientific background, I have those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been an endeavor of mine to, because I have the scientific background and the research that I did, and the projects that I worked on were looking at how the mind works, how the brain works, you know, how is decision making happening at what we call a pre-conscious level before the conscious mind knows.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is kind of a leap to be like, and that kind of accounts for, what's happening with mindfulness meditation or, yoga practice. But there's plenty of evidence for kind of the neuroscience of these practices now, in 2026. There's a lot more research, there's a lot more evidence that I tell people, because a lot of people will say, well, I don't like meditation or meditation isn't good for me, or meditation is spiritual. A lot of people think these things are like spiritual practices. And I see that that's a block for a lot of people because they might, think that be afraid that it's going to interfere with their personal spiritual beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, there is such a thing as metacognition. And that's what but from a neuroscience point of view, metacognition means that you're optimizing the information processing that's happening
Okay.
in the nervous system, and that meditation, mindfulness practices increase neuroplasticity. They increase blood flow to those areas, and it optimizes the function of those areas, which then means that they're functioning better and we're digesting and synthesizing information more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? That's the definition of intuition
See,
is
yeah,
I don't know how I got there, but I got there.
right. Yeah, and like in for the people that you work with, what is that moment like when they realize, I don't know how I got there, but I got there?
Mhm.
What is that like for them? What have you seen from them?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty exciting moment for people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's like there's an I got it moment, like, oh my God, something's happening, something's real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like a little aha moment that then you can build on to
Okay.
say, okay, like something's here, like I got some information, that information is being validated
Mm-hmm.
externally. And so there's an alignment in the way that I'm processing information with the outcomes that I'm trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
Which is different than like, intuition in the kind of woo-woo sense of it, right?
Right.
It's like I'm training my the information processing centers of the brain, I'm training them on what to focus on. And if it's where my attention is going, and that's changing the way that the information is being processed so that I can synthesize the information that I'm getting in relationship to my attention and what I'm focusing on, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's training that kind of quick decision making, that aha. And to that end, a lot of people who come to me who are like, I don't know if any of this is real, or I don't really like meditation, or I'm not really good at it. It's like, when you first went to the gym on day one,
Yep.
you probably didn't want to work out. You didn't like working out. But
It's
why? But you did it. Why? Because it just improves your health. It improves your blood flow. You have more energy during the day. Like it's new. It's nourishing.
yeah.
And so meditation is like that. But it's for your brain, right, and your nervous system. So it's kind of bringing blood flow and activation and strength to to the brain and the nervous system. Yeah.
And it also feels like people have to prove to themselves that this is real
Hmm.
and make a practice of doing it and not necessarily trying to become a world class meditator, as it were, but
Right.
trying to just be consistent with it, I would imagine.
Yes, and I think you're right. It's not about being good at meditation. That's 100% what I tell people when they're like, "I'm no good at meditation." I was like, "No one's good at meditation. That's not, that's not the point of meditation, right?"
Hmm.
And to your point, there's no Olympic sport of meditation where somebody gets a prize or something or a medal.
Hmm.
And it's a tool, right? It's a tool, and the other piece that comes with it is, yes, there's that aha moment of like, wait a minute, there's a synchronicity between the information that I'm getting, sort of inductively. I don't know how I know it, but I know it. And that's syncing up with what's, you know, happening in the real world. That's like step one, right?
Right.
To that clarity of the tool. But step two is getting beyond the I need to make a right decision. Like, oh, my
Yep.
decision is being validated, so I made a right decision. That's important. But
Hmm.
then the next stage is understanding that when you get good at decision making, there's no right or wrong decision because you have the capacity to just work with what happens.
And when your clients hear that from you, how do they feel?
Oh yeah, I think in the beginning there's this like that's a nice idea. There's a
Okay,
little
yeah.
bit of skepticism,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, sure.
Um, And that was one reason I wrote the book,
Yeah.
actually, because I've been doing this kind of coaching for like 10 years. And, I think people will say, well, I'm going to just make, yeah, okay, yeah, I got the right, things are syncing up, but is it a fluke? Is it a coincidence? Am I just making it up? Is it confirmation
Yeah.
bias? Right. And so the book, I mean, it goes into the story of how I got to the place where I mean, these came from tools that I was using for myself in
Hmm.
my own business. And then people saw the results that I was getting in my business and said, wait a minute, how are you doing that? I want to learn. And so I just started
Okay.
teaching people.
Yeah.
Um, but I think even as someone who did it for myself and was working with other people, I think I had the question of like, okay, well, it works for me. Doesn't mean it's
Hmm.
going to work for somebody else. Right.
Hmm.
So it's not a one size fits all. It's not like a formula for how to develop, but it's more about understanding the nature of what intuition development is and how to work with it rather than a woo-woo kind of magical thing, which I think a lot of people will kind of get into magical thinking of like, I'm just going to learn this thing and then everything's going to come into place. Or if it doesn't, then it doesn't work for me, right?
Sure.
And so it's more of understanding the neuroscience reasons why you might even want to do these kind of practices. What are these tools really doing from a neuroscience point of view, which I
Hmm.
think demystifies it. It demystifies it for people in a way that feels like,
Hmm.
okay, this is not a spiritual thing. It's not going to interfere with my beliefs, or I'm not going to suddenly open a portal. I mean, these are kind of things that people sometimes ask me, like, am I going to open a portal to some weird thing, or you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, maybe, but I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that that's like not in the very least in terms of the nature of the work,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Um, yeah, and so I think part of holding the space as the coach is, this work was a labor of love for me because people had those kind of questions. Um, what is this, and why would I do it, and how does this work, and am I just making it up? And it's like, yeah, when you focus on your business as a separate thing, you're training the way your information is processing, to be able to feel the yes and process and synthesize information in a way that aligns with the questions that you're asking, the kind of answers that you're looking for, or the kind of outcomes that you're trying to create.
Hmm. Because I can imagine that entrepreneurs are coming to you, and we both have been in this realm for, me for just a couple years, you for quite a bit, and you sort of see the same things, and you see this, sort of same mindset blocks,
Yeah.
and how it's how do and when they come to you, what state are they in? Are they in a frazzled state? Or are they, at their wits' end? What condition are they in when they come to see you?
It's a great question. I don't know if there's just one way that people come, but I think
Hmm.
that the the thing that I find people struggling with and where they're stuck. I mean, I would say number one, however people come to me, that's where we end up working is where people feel stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that's where when you start to work with the stuckness, it's more than just a mindset issue. It's those unconscious beliefs. It's the stories that have been told, not only
Mm-hmm.
from ourselves, but maybe the story of how we got there through our work history and our job relationships. And we experience betrayals in the workplace from our
Yeah.
coworkers and our, supervisors, and those kind of stresses and strains are carried with us and become a part of the story of stuckness, right?
Right.
People will come to me and say, I'm super successful in what I do, but this is how I'm known. And these are the kind of jobs that people are asking me to do. And this is the kind of work that I'm being asked to do, but it's not the work that I want to do. It's not the work that I think is my best work. And I feel stuck. How do I open those new doors? How do I get into those new rooms? How do I, go into those interviews and be seen not through the long history of all those past positions on my resume, but through the other contributions through my articles and my research and, the innovations that I've been doing, and to be seen and valued enough for people to give me the contract or the position, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or for the entrepreneurs that I work with, there's just this rampant thing going on in the coaching space, where, business coaches especially have some kind of a formula, you know,
Yeah.
that says, this is
Mm-hmm.
how you run your business. This
Mm-hmm.
is how you market yourself. This is what it means, and I've heard, being a business coach myself, I've been in a lot of rooms with business coaches, either people that I was getting coached by or just in rooms of people having conversations. And, there tends to be this kind of approach of like, business, you need to cut off your emotions and just do the practical thing and just be boring and just be left brained. And I think for conscious entrepreneurs, I mean, I think people become entrepreneurs because they're looking for an innovation in their lifestyle and their impact. And those things just don't match up.
Right. Right. I've seen that in my journey where some business coaches, as you said, they have a formula, and they're going to try to jam you into that formula, but that formula doesn't speak to who you are deep down inside, how you operate, and what your goals might be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And what for me as a conscious entrepreneur, I really, that's part of my mission and my why is helping people who are not in it for the profits. The profits are a byproduct of the impact and the reach
Mhm.
of that heart-centered vision, to see those people investing in those kind of coaching engagements or in those rooms and feeling like, well, I don't fit into the formula, so something's wrong with me. I'm
Right.
doing something wrong.
Hmm.
And what's true is that that may not be the right formula for you.
Yes. And you help them find the right formula for them.
That's right.
I want,
That's right.
yeah, I want to take a step back, and you mentioned this just a couple of times. Who is a conscious entrepreneur in your mind?
Yeah, I think a conscious entrepreneur, by the way, a conscious entrepreneur could be somebody who has a W-2, who has a day job, so to speak. I think of a conscious entrepreneur as someone who feels passionate about what they're doing and is not just there as a job. It's not just a job. I'm there. I'm a person who is trying to make impact in the world in some way, and my work is the vehicle by which I'm doing that.
Mm.
And so it could be your business is the vehicle, it could be your career is the vehicle. Um, and I think a central, and this isn't Shelley's definition, this is sort of like the definition of conscious entrepreneur, is that it's not a profit-driven business, right?
Right.
So when a company is started, a lot of companies are just, obviously we want to maximize profits and make the shareholders happy, and that's whatever we need to do that is what we're doing, right?
Mhm.
Like, there are people who go and, are like, well, what does the world need? Let me open that business or let me create that product, right?
Right.
So they're not coming from, I'm creating something or doing something that I think is going to positively impact society or the culture or a particular population of people or meet an important need that is not being profit driven, it's purpose driven, but you obviously still need to be profitable in order
Right.
to stay in business. Otherwise it's a hobby, right? Or
Right.
a non, like a charity or something. So I think in general, conscious entrepreneurship can be, that's typically the way I think about it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And and I think the way you put it is very reachable and graspable for people, because I think, and I want to get your opinion on this, where sometimes it feels like people in the wider world may view coaching as being woo woo, and I'm wondering, and how do you deal with that definition, that idea that coaching is woo?
Hmm. Well, and are you kind of referring like in general to the coaching profession?
In general, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a really challenging space to be in, as somebody who I consciously decided to choose coaching over, I mean, I was a psychology undergrad. I mean, I could have gone on to get my PhD and become a psychologist, right? And have a
Right.
therapy practice. There was a conscious decision on my part to not go that direction because I felt like I was interested in doing something more empowering, having a
Mm.
more, so there's kind of a power differential. When you're a therapist, you're diagnosing and treating, and there's a lot of pathologizing in that, career. That's your job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your job is to find out what's wrong and fix it. And I'm just, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that path. I just
Mhm.
felt like it didn't resonate with my values. And especially looking at, you know, studying consciousness and how we make meaning. I'm like, well, what's the consciousness of pathologizing? You
Yeah. Right.
know?
Yeah.
And so one of the principal values of coaching is that clients are resourceful and whole.
Indeed. Yes.
So
Absolutely.
someone may be struggling with a mental health challenge or overwhelm or complex stress and complex trauma. They might have had a lot of adversity. They might have a disease that's been diagnosed that's they're having to accommodate in their life story and their life choices, right? All of
Right.
those things, health
Yeah.
challenges and whatnot. But in a coaching context, it's not about let's fix that. That's what's wrong with you. Let's fix it. It's there's a whole person here, and how do we hold space for all of you and include that in the way that we're approaching, whatever it is that you're working on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And and you mentioned you mentioned it just a little while ago, and at the beginning of our conversation about empowerment, and how important is it for you to convey to the people that you're working with that they are empowered?
I think that's central. I think it's incredibly central to my approach. I think it's a challenge, to the profession because I think that people have a hard time as a consumer.
Yeah.
I think consumers have a hard time. They're like, well, I'm paying you, so I need to get results, right?
Yes.
So it's helping to educate and inform clients that that's part of the results is the empowerment is part of the results because by not fixing you, by not telling you what to do, but exploring options and helping you decide, educating you,
Yeah.
I'm actually teaching you how to do that for yourself
Bingo.
and
Exactly.
trust your inner yes, trust your inner knowing. Um, when I was I mean, I did a master's degree in coaching. I mean, kind of went the extra step there
Yeah.
because I was trying to develop an evidence basis for my method while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just delighted um, when I was there, we were studying like, well, what's the benefit of coaching? And I don't mean like, oh, I have pre-diabetes and I did coaching and did it get better, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like that's one measure of results, but we're looking at the actual benefits of the relationship of that coaching dynamic.
Yeah.
There's enormous benefits to the coaching, the method itself, and its benefit to the client. They're learning interpersonal relationship skills. There's that co-regulation that happens,
Mm-hmm.
and also I was delighted to see that when you let people make their own choices, even when they're not the quote unquote right choices, they have better outcomes
Right. Exactly.
because they're empowered, because they're,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, okay, well, I thought that the client can come back and say, well, that's what I thought would help. But I've explored that option and it took me as far as I can. So now I'm more confident to try something else. I'm more confident to go deeper, right?
Right.
And I think that's the power of coaching, because when you go to a doctor, when you go to like a healthcare provider, they're just telling you what to do, right? And either
Yeah.
you do it
Right.
or you don't.
Yes.
And so there's so much value to the coaching role. But to your point, your original question was the woo-woo as a woo-woo profession.
Yeah.
I think the problem that we're facing right now with coaching is it's not a regulated industry.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of people out there who are calling themselves coaches that don't actually coach. They want to sell something or provide a service and they want to be able to charge, and they don't want to have any accountability for
Accountability.
it. So they're
Exactly.
calling themselves coaches. And I think that's why coach training is so important. I think it's so important to go through a credentialed, you know, institute where
Mm-hmm.
there's coach skills are taught,
Yeah.
coaching ethics. For me personally,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I did the International Coaching Federation
Yeah.
training, was because of the coaching ethics. They align with my personal values, and I said, well, I want to, have that as a badge, on my wherever people find me, that the ethics are important, that I'm, part of an organization that values that and part of a community that values that.
Mm-hmm. And where you can trade ideas, trade thoughts, and you know, become a better coach that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And so
Community of support. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm curious as we start to wrap up, why is this work important to you?
That's a great question. I think, I kind of stumbled in, following my yes and kind of,
Mm-hmm.
taking these different leaps. I kind of stumbled into this,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
when I was 8 years old, and I was like, I want to be a teacher because I went to school and I liked my teachers, and it's like we all kind of have our version of that, right? Where we're like,
Right.
I don't know what I want to be. And and there's no way at 8 years old that I could have possibly imagined at this stage of life doing this. It didn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So there's a kind of a delight to that alchemy of, just life's journey. And, I started getting into it because people saw the change in me and wanted to create that change within themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
when I work with people and kind of walk them through the steps of their own transformation, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a personal transformation. Sometimes it's like a really targeted goal that somebody's working on. They'll come to me and they're like, my business is in crisis. I made a big investment. I'm about to lose my tail here. Let's get through. There's
Mm-hmm.
a whole range of transformations that can happen. And being in that place with that person of celebration, of like, wow, this is amazing. I get to hold space for people while they go through the transformation and
Mm-hmm.
witness it. It's very nourishing to me. It's fulfilling. And one of my core values with my work that I talk a lot about in my book is helping people reduce that sort of legacy of overwhelm,
Right.
overworking
Yes.
and overwhelm that, kind of defines the work life now, Western lifestyle.
Mhm.
And, people will come in and they'll be like, I'm not sleeping at night. I'm, you know, maxed out. I have no bandwidth. I'm doing all the right things and I'm just not moving the needle. And to help support them finding new strategies where they're no longer, on that hamster wheel. And right, because I think there's a fear of like, well, if I take my foot off the gas, everything's going to fall apart, and be able to hold space to say, like, you took your foot off the gas and things got better, right? We like, we got some great strategies going to help you not just get the results you wanted, but also like a shift in your quality of life and your performance,
Yeah. It's a very
that
counterintuitive idea. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that's what I love, is being like, see, you didn't have to work so hard. Isn't that amazing? You know,
Yeah.
it's you work strategically, right? You're
Great.
not it's not like, oh, I'm not working at all, but you're working strategically in a way where you're not sacrificing your excellence. You know,
Mhm. It,
and
it,
I
and that's a mindset shift for people.
yeah,
A big mindset shift.
yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's just more capacity to digest and synthesize and make better choices, and, work on these more, these deeper levels that we were talking about. A lot of times I find intuition is just the capacity to digest and synthesize what's happening, that we have the bandwidth and the space to do that, so that then those breakthroughs, those insights, those ahas can happen. And just creating the space for that is incredibly rewarding.
I can, it's a very meaningful space to be able to be in and to watch someone transform and in knowing that you played a role in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Shelley Poovey, the author of The Energy Intelligent Business and the founder and lead faculty member at Attune Coach Academy, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is my website, which is bizattune.com,
Hmm?
www.bizattune.com. You can find me, Attune Coach Academy, on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Those are like the easiest ways to
Okay.
contact me.
Okay. And we'll have those in the show notes, and we'll also have a link to your book as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, yeah. So Shelley Poovey, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard. This has been great.
If you're looking for work that works for you, come find me at richardtaliaferro.com. Thanks for listening, and talk to you next week.